It was almost Christmas. My parents and I went to visit my grandparents, and I remember how excited I was since I had missed hanging out with my two cousins, Kisima and Njiwa. I was 8 years old back then. I remembered arriving so late at night, and my grandmother prepared us quite a meal. After the meal, we all went to sleep. When my parents left our room, Kisima, Njiwa, and I sat up, and we started telling each other about the scary movies that we had watched that year. Some were a little scary, others, oh well. Then Kisima told us a story that sent chills down my spine. It was about a certain woman who pretended she was lost in the woods. She would change into a man or a young girl or even a baby just to convince the villagers into believing her. She targeted those who crossed near the forest or those who fetched firewood in the forest and would eat them alive afterwards. Then Kisima laughed, saying that she wasn't real, that it was just the grown-ups who invented such stories to scare kids from playing near the forest. Njiwa told her that she shouldn't say that. The rest of us were too scared to speak. To prove her point, Kisima told us to follow her and see for ourselves that there is no such thing. Njiwa and Kisima both stood up, ready to go. I didn't like that idea at all. But since I didn't want any of them to know how scared I was, I followed them. We slowly opened the window, and the three of us sneaked out. The moon shone brightly, and we were able to see where we were going. We quietly walked towards the forest, as none of us wanted to wake any of the neighbors, let alone our family. It was quite a distance, but we got there finally. Kisima did not falter from her story and went into the dark forest to prove her point. I cursed myself for following her. If my parents discovered we were missing, they would kill us for sure. What have I gotten myself into? The refreshing air from the towering canopy of trees did soothe my worries. The forest was so quiet I could hear my own thoughts and heartbeats at the same time. I told Kisima we believed her and that we should head back now. Njiwa quickly agreed and we soon started going back. But before making any other step, I heard a child's voice calling out to us. I turned to Njiwa, who was behind me, and it seemed he didn't hear a thing. Same to Kisima. I thought I must be hearing things or imagining them. It must be the wind through the trees, I thought to myself. The child's voice grew louder this time. Oh hell no! Now that's real, I told myself. I turned to Njiwa, who by now had stopped. So did Kisima. Did you hear that? Njiwa asked. I did, I said. Probably some kids are playing a prank on us. Come on, let's head back before Grandpa discovers we aren't home. Now hurry, Kisima said, walking away. When I turned, I almost screamed. I was face to face with a young boy looking straight at me with two dark, empty eyes. They had no pupils, and the white part of the eyes was just black. It was difficult to know if he was looking at me or not. He looked so pale, as if he was dead and came back to life 3 minutes ago. Jesus, kid! You almost scared me to death, I said, gasping for air. Please help me. I'm lost. I can't find my mommy, he said, oblivious to my heavy breathing. Njiwa was taken aback. Where did you come from? We didn't see you coming. What happened to your eyes? Njiwa said, confused. Just leave him and let's go, Kisima said and took off. But he is lost. We should help him, I said. Njiwa turned to look at me and he looked so scared as he pointed behind me. He was just there. I turned to look at what he was looking at. The boy was nowhere to be seen. I was so confused as to where the boy went. As we stood there confused and partly scared, we heard someone step on a thick branch and cracked it. We turned, but we didn't see anyone. We heard a spine-chilling sound erupting from the other side that froze everyone in their tracks. I have never in my life heard such a sound, and my body refused to cooperate. I just stood there. So did Kisima and Njiwa. And then a figure slowly emerged behind Kisima, who was ahead of us. It first appeared like that of a human, but as it came closer and with the help of the moon that shone brightly above us, I was able to make out its features. It was a woman, a beautiful woman. We watched her quietly as she neared Kisima, and that's when I saw its full body. It had no legs at all. It was half human, half a snake. It slithered around Kisima's body, and I could see how frightened Kisima was. Then it talked. What do we have here? Oh, just a bunch of selfish little bastards who refused to help me, and now they're trespassing in my property. But don't worry, my little darlings. I'm not mad at you. Where are your parents? Never mind. I have candies and plenty of toys for you guys. Like how many? Njiwa asked. I saw him looking at the woman in curious amusement. Njiwa! We don't know her. Besides, we aren't supposed to talk to strangers, Kisima said. But I'm no stranger at all. I'm your friend. I just want to share some of the toys with you guys. I have so many candies and toys and other cool stuffs which I'm sure you guys will love. I also know a shortcut so you don't have to worry about getting home late. The woman said and smiled. There was something about her smile I didn't like. Before Njiwa could say anything, I quickly said no. She shifted her gaze towards me. We don't want your candies or toys. We don't know you, so why should we trust you? Now back off. This seemed to offend her, and immediately her calmed demeanor switched, and her eyebrows came down together as the vertical wrinkles appeared in between. Her lips tightened, and her round-shaped pupils were replaced with the keyhole-shaped pupils. I saw her flicking her tail as she hissed at me. As she was about to attack, Njiwa threw a stone towards her, but it missed and hit a tree next to it. This seemed to work as it shifted its attention to Njiwa. Without thinking, I grabbed Kisima's hand and ran like a maniac. I don't know where I got the strength from, but what I knew was that thing wanted our blood. Looking back, I saw Njiwa behind us, but surprisingly, the creature wasn't chasing us. I heard Njiwa shouting on top of his lungs, "Run! Run! Just go without me!" Go! Kisima was about to fall, but I held on to her and told her that we'll make it. Out of nowhere, the creature materialized in front of us. Her face was no longer beautiful, but demonic, and it scared the hell out of us. Without warnings or anything, it leaped and bit on Kisima's hand. She let out a loud, paralyzing scream that could be heard from miles. I tried kicking it, but I would miss a couple of times. It sunk its teeth in her hand, and Kisima's cries terrified me. I fumbled around on the ground, trying to get something that I could use as a weapon. I was able to find a large stone, and I struggled to lift it up with my 2 hands. I gathered all my might, and I threw it towards the creature. I was able to hit the creature's head, and it screamed in pain. It charged towards me and threw me with so much force that I went flying in the air. I landed on my back, and I heard a crack in my neck. God, is this how I'm going to die? I wondered as I felt blood oozing from my scalp. I held out my hands to feel the now bloody wound in my head. As I opened my eyes, I saw the creature almost tearing Jiwa's leg. I gathered all the strength I had, and with a stick in my right hand, I charged towards the creature, this time targeting its eyes. I pounced on it and knocked it to the ground, piercing its right eye, then plucked its left one. It let out a terrifying scream, and that's all I could remember before losing my consciousness. When I opened my eyes, I was in the hospital, and my parents were sick, worried about me. It was later on that I was told by my parents that the 3 of us were rushed to the hospital as we were found in a sorry state. Both Njiwa and I had passed out, and only Kisima was crying out for help. My parents said they heard screams and rushed to check on us but couldn't find us. So they, together with my grandpa and the neighbors, came running towards the forest. By the time they arrived, the creature was long gone and had left us to die. The 3 of us recovered from the injuries, and I traveled back to the city with my parents. 5 years later, I still remember what went down in the deep forest late at night, and it still sends chills down my spine. Do not go into the forest at night, or you will never be able to come out alive. Kibichi had a neighbor by the name Pendo. She was in her early 30s. There were times she would be a little distant and standoffish towards people and will lose track of time. One minute she was sweet, kind-hearted lady, and the next she was completely the opposite. With time, Kibichi got used to her and will keep her distance in case Pendo was moody. Pendo was a sweet lady despite her odd behaviors. She was a tight-lipped person and will often keep things to herself. Every afternoon when Kibichi came home from work, she will often find her glued to her chair reading a novel or just a random book just outside her house. Kibichi will say hi and try to engage her in a conversation. At times Pendo will join in, and other times she will just nod her head or simply ignore her. This went on for a couple of months until Pendo stopped coming out of her house. This was because she found a job at one of the local bars as a bartender. Few months passed and Pendo became pregnant. She didn't seem so thrilled about it, but she kept it anyways. No one in the neighborhood knew who the father was, since Pendo lived alone and was never seen hanging out with any man. And also Pendo kept things to herself, so her life was a mystery to others. She soon gave birth to twins. One was a baby boy, Lenny, and the other was a girl, Lani. However, she wasn't that of a loving mother to them. She would often leave them alone at night to go to work. She would even go to a point of starving her babies just so she could sleep. When the kids turned 4, Pendo will spend most of her time wasting herself in the club or lock herself up in her room with different kinds of men while her kids were starving and craving for their mother's embrace. Some other times, Pendo will show much love to her kids and will go out and just have fun at the park, or they will watch some cartoons in the house. Pendo's behavior was quite alarming, and Kibichi tried talking some sense to Pendo, but this only worsened the situation. Kibichi will often hear Pendo screaming on top of her lungs to her kids, scolding them early in the mornings when she came home from her night shifts. The children would be heard crying, scared of their mother. Kibichi on several occasions will call the police and report Pendo for her bizarre mode of parenting, but the police didn't do much. This was because Pendo was having an affair with the inspector and no officer could lift a finger at her. What could Kibichi do? Absolutely nothing, since that's how the police department operated in the area she resides. But Kibichi still never gave up. She emailed other departments in other towns and even tried calling their office lines in the hopes of saving these little fellas. All of her emails and calls went unanswered. She'll often let the kids stay at her place and will feed them and clean them up. Her heart sank when she noticed some bruises on their necks, arms, and even legs. She'd watch the little fellas staring at the TV in awe as they watched the cartoons, and will start to sing along with the cartoons, happily waving their little arms along with the music. Every time Pendo will come for her kids at Kibichi's house, she reeked of alcohol. She would try to steady herself, but her drunken movements were throwing her off and causing her to tip over. Then one day, Kibichi sat the twins down and asked them calmly if their mother hurts them. The little girl started playing with her fingers, her movements jittery and her eyes panicked. The boy slowly nodded, then looked down. Kibichi's hands reached out to grab his small hands. "Do you feel pain anywhere?" she asked. We might get into trouble if Mama knows we told you," the girl whispered. She looked nervous and tears welled up in her eyes. Kibichi gently kissed her forehead and assured her that she won't tell anyone. "Mama is always upset with us. She yells at us when we pee in our beds. She hits us if we tell her we are hungry, and also when we want to go and play with other kids. She even poured hot water in my brother's legs yesterday. I don't know why Mom is so mad at us. The little girl's voice quivered as she talked. The words clenched around Kibichi's heart, but she promised herself she won't cry. Her blood was at its highest boiling point. She forced herself to remain strong and comfort these little fellas. When Kibichi was about to say something, she heard someone knocking on the door. She went to see who it was and found a man, one of Pendo's lover, Majani. She opened the door and the man didn't bother to greet her. "Where are the kids?" His voice was gruff and dark. "Sweethearts, it's time to go home." Kibichi called the twins, who came running towards the guy. He smiled and looked at them. "Missed me? How about we go grab something to eat? Sounds good, right?" He said and grabbed their little hands. The kids looked terrified. There was a time Lenny was too weak to move a muscle. He hadn't eaten for days, and his little body was failing him. His hands were badly bruised from all the work he had done previously. When Lani saw this, she knew she had to save her brother, even if it meant it would get her into trouble. She quickly stole some bread and a bottle of water in the kitchen room, as Majani was busy watching the TV, and she took it to her brother. Lenny wolfed down the bread within a couple of seconds. It felt so good to finally fill his stomach, and his body weaknesses almost instantly subsided as he gulped down the bottled water. As they were cleaning the house, Majani's voice boomed behind them. A small gasp escaped Lenny's lips. They turned to see Majani watching them furiously. "Who took the bread that was in the kitchen? If you don't speak right now, I'm going to skin both of you alive. Now speak!" He screamed. The twins only stared at him in paralyzed fear. "Cut your tongue. I'm going to count to 3. If none of you don't speak up, oh boy. 1, Majani said. Before he said 2, Lani quickly said it was her and that she was sorry. Majani lunged at her and grabbed her by the arms. He dug his fingernails into her bare skin, making her bleed bit by bit. She screamed in pain. "Let her go! Leave her alone! It was my fault. I was the one who was hungry. So leave her alone. Let her go!" Lenny cried as he tried to wrestle the huge guy, but the guy kicked him so hard and sent him sprawling on the floor. Majani then hit Lani on her face with a strong blow. This immediately sent her to the floor. He then kicked her in the stomach several times. She thought she would vomit her guts out. The door was opened and Pendo came in looking around. "What is just happening here, for God's sake?" she yelled. "She took what doesn't belong to her, and that's what she gets," Majani roared. The twins ran to their mother crying. She sighed and glared angrily at the twins. She lowered her head to face both of them and asked, "What did you do now?" "Mommy, I was hungry. So I took some bread in the kitchen, but I'm sorry," I'm sorry. It won't happen again, I promise. What did I say about taking something that doesn't belong to you? Let this be the last time, Lani. You too, Lenny. Now go to your room. Now, she told the twins. The next day, the twins were woken up by their mother's screams. Pendo and Majani were fighting again, throwing things at each other. This went on for a couple of days until Majani stopped coming to their house altogether. At first, the twins were thrilled by that. No more starving, no more being yelled at for no reason. They felt free once again, but Pendo's drinking habits escalated. She would lock the kids in the house the whole day without leaving them any food and return late at night only to shout at them and curse them. Mommy, are you okay? Lenny asked his mother when he found her crying on the couch. Pendo grabbed him by the shoulders. Do I look okay? If it wasn't for you and your sister, I would have been rich and beautiful. Every man would want me. But you two ruined all that, she said with so much hate in her voice. Lenny's small shoulders heaved as he took a deep breath. We are sorry, Mommy. We won't do anything to upset you. I promise. I'm so sorry, Mommy, he said. This seemed to irritate Pendo, and she yelled at Lenny to go to his room. Pendo's mood worsened, and she constantly blamed her kids for the miserable life she was living. This went on for a while, until one fateful night. Pendo took her kids out to the park and bought them their favorite toys. The kids were skeptical at first, but they feared upsetting their mother, and so they played along. Pendo was so sweet to them and even bought them new clothes. This was so strange for the twins, and they couldn't help but wonder what was happening to their mother. That night, Pendo prepared a delicious meal for her kids and even read them a bedtime story and tucked them into bed afterwards. In the middle of the night, Pendo walked in the kitchen and shuffled through the drawers. She took out a knife and stared at it for some time. She grabbed a nearby bottle of whiskey and sat on the floor crying as she sipped it. After some time, she stood and wobbled a bit, clearly drunk. She had to grab onto the wall. She dragged herself to her children's bedroom. She slowly opened the door and saw her kids' eyes closed and their chest rising in a soft rhythm. She sniffed and wiped a tear off her left cheek. Kibichi was woken up by the police sirens just outside her house. Then someone knocked her door and she went to check who it was. She opened to find 2 police officers. We apologize for disturbing you this early morning, ma'am, but there are few questions we'd like to ask you, if you don't mind. One of the police officers said. It was after being questioned by the police for almost 20 minutes that Kibichi knew what was going on. The twins were no more. It turned out that Pendo had tied them up, securing both of them tightly to their own beds and gagged their mouth so no one could hear them when they screamed for help. She then took out the knife and began stabbing Lani first, Then Lenny. She stabbed both of them 10 times and then ran away. Penda was later discovered in one of her numerous boyfriends' house who had invited her to his party. She was extremely intoxicated. It was discovered that the reason as to why Penda killed her children was because they got in her way. She felt that they were a burden to her and she just wanted to have fun, not raising a bunch of kids.